Good evening, Allen Temple. It is me once again, Reverend Dr. Jacqueline Thompson, Senior Pastor at Allen Temple Baptist Church, welcoming each of you to our Theological Thursdays. We are so glad that you all have decided to join us tonight, and we are hopeful that you have been helped and changed and challenged in the conversations we've had in the past. Before we get started tonight, let me do a couple of things. First thing I need to do is thank you. Thank you to all of you who came out this past Sunday to Merritt College to our Revolution service. I told you that we were trying to test vehicle-based gatherings because Alameda County has given permission for about 200 cars to gather. So we wanted to test it out first with about 100 cars, and you all showed up and showed out as usual. We are grateful to our youth who planned a service of protest, and there was song and spoken word. It was a beautiful setting. The Spirit of the Lord moved, and I am so glad that this is something that hopefully we'll be able to do moving forward. Now, I recognize some of you said you did not receive the email, and so I apologize to you for that because the database that we use to send it out is different than the one we use for the newsletter. So in the next couple of days, you're going to see a request to make sure your membership profile is up to date. Because if that's going to be the primary mode of communication, we want to make sure we have all of your information correct in our membership database. So make sure you check that email out or that phone call, that newsletter that you're going to get that says update your email so we can make sure we are all connected and in touch. And tonight, like every Thursday night, we have two incredible guests who are engaging us in conversation around the concept of fighting the good fight of faith. That was the word that Paul gave to Timothy, challenging him to fight the good fight of faith. And so we're going to launch this conversation and just kind of see where it goes. And I am blessed to have with us tonight no strangers. We know them. They are technically family. But I'm going to introduce them because they are just that incredible. So help me welcome tonight to Theological Thursdays, Reverend John, ordained Disciples of Christ, founder of the Oakland Peace Center, which is a collective of about 40 organizations whose goal is to create access to dignity and peace for Oakland and the Bay Area. We are grateful for her. She is an incredible supporter, woman of God, preacher, because we have heard her preach. And she is also an anti-racism, anti-oppression trainer with Reconciliation Ministries as a part of the Disciples of Christ. And she's a faith-rooted organizer with our very own Leadership Institute, the Emerging Leaders Program. She is a trained in classical music. Do I have that right? Trained in classical music, but she loves to sing folk and gospel and jazz. And of course, she has a Master of Divinity, a Master of Public Policy. She is an all-around incredible woman of God, and I thank God for her presence tonight. And tag teaming with her is none other. Welcome to the OG in the building, Servant B.K. Woodson, better known as Mr. Wow himself at the end of it. So everybody just pause now or type in the comments. Just type wow.
Wow. Amen.
Because that's how every prayer is going to end when he prays. We are grateful for him. He is the founding pastor of the Bay Area Christian Connection, trained at Syracuse, trained at United Theological Seminary, Old Testament scholar, GTU. What else can you say? What else can you say? Director of Clergy Development for OCO. Do I have that right? I want to make sure I
Faith in
have
Action
it right.
East Bay now.
Faith in Action East Bay. Them name changes. I need y'all to decide. PICO, Faith in Action, OC. But that's a conversation for another day. Help me welcome them tonight. Please type in the comments. Welcome. Both of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're honored to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So much.
We recognize time is of the essence these days. It seems like if you are clergy, and even for some of you who are not clergy, we just Zoom all day from morning till night, back-to-back meetings. And so I'm really grateful and appreciative that they have decided to give us some of their time. So here is the context for our conversation tonight. I shared with him earlier that if, like me, you have been out, you have been watching the news, you've been kind of zooming around the city, it almost feels like we are no longer in a pandemic. Things are opening up. They're shifting back to normal. We have buried 2 Black men. I'm not even sure it's been a full 7 days, certainly not a full 2 weeks' time. And so all of the grieving that is happening according to that, we see the politicizing of social distancing and all the protocols the CDC have established in a campaign rally held in a church with people sitting right next to each other, with racial slurs being used by a candidate for the presidency who is now the president, and amazingly, even though there are clergy and churches and voices that are speaking, I have to admit that the silence is resounding. And so after a while, you can just get tired. You can get tired of fighting. You can get tired of protesting. You can get tired of being sheltering in place. I even find myself zipping around places, getting out the car, forgetting my mask. And as people of faith who have to often wait on the Lord to move, recognizing that we serve a God whose timing is not our timing, I want to have a real conversation about what it looks like to fight the good fight of faith. Because the other context of our conversation comes from Jeremiah 12. So go get your Bibles, go get your iPad, get your separate device, whatever it is, that we're doing Bible study on. I have a grandmother that believed in paper Bibles. So I have a paper Bible so that we can flip to it. And in Jeremiah chapter 12, Jeremiah has some complaints. He has some questions for God. It's questions that we all ask God. Why do the wicked prosper? Why does it seem like I have to struggle to get tested in East Oakland, but the president can get tested every single day? The NBA can have access to tests, which is what, right? So all of this in context, why do the wicked prosper? How long are we going to have to deal with this? Lord, when are you going to act? And so the amazing thing is when God does respond, God don't answer none of the questions. God does not provide a defense at all. God simply says, if you get tired running with footmen, if you're tired of being sheltered in place and home now, if you're tired, of not being able to come to the sanctuary now, how in the world, Jeremiah, are you going to be able to run with horses? And so with that, I ask both of you to really kind of define that concept of activism fatigue or believer fatigue and what that means, and have you all experienced that? And can you relate to people who might be viewing us tonight who just say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm ready to go back to church. I'm ready to go to the store. I'm ready to go to a concert. I'm not sick. I don't know nobody sick. Right? How do you respond?
Yeah. I'm going to let you go first, servant.
Oh, no, I was going to let the wisdom go. I'll try and be short. First, I want to say, and I'm going to hit it right back to Reverend Ja. I want to say first that I remain in awe of the Reverend Dr. Jackie Thompson.
Yep.
I love hearing her. It's like, how does her mind work that fast, and how do the metaphors come so quickly? How do the stories make so much sense? And I just really, and you do discourage me. I'm kind of like, I should not preach, God. Just, you got good preachers. Don't use me. But Pastor Jackie, I think you are the bomb diggity. I just really, really think you are incredible. So
thank you, and know that it's mutual. It's mutual.
Well, I tell everybody that. So I tell everybody that. So, and then to be with Sandhya, which is my tag team, and what I love about Shonda is Shonda has a very different perspective than mine, and almost the opposite, and she's always right. So that's what I love about her. She can just gently help me see something different. But we thank God we don't live in a world where just because a different perspective may be polar opposite doesn't mean your perspective is wrong. See, it means we have to have balance, and balance often has opposites to bring justice or harmony or what I believe the Lord's will is, right? Because there is night and day, right? There is sunlight and darkness that brings it all into balance, which may be the metaphor we need to chat about. And I'll just, because I like tag teaming, I'm going to go right to Shonda, but to address the question, yes, I get incredibly fatigued, and I have just today, I'm struggling with the dilemma of which good thing do I do? Do I do the things that people expect me to do? Do I do the things people are asking me to do? Do I do I imagine I'm being paid to do? Or do I do the things I think I'm on the planet to do? Do I do the things I really want to do? Do I do the things I think the Spirit is calling me to do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a tyranny in those questions, at least for me. And the question is then, how do I pray in a balance? Because I'm going to say this and stop. I am called most places in California servant B.K. Woodson. I take on the moniker servant, and there's three reasons I do that. One is because as a Black man in America, that's how I am seen. The Slavocracy has not ended. When I walk in a room, folk without melanin think there's a servant right there, right? He's supposed to take care of our needs. The other reason I use the word servant is because I'm an ACA, right? An adult child of an alcoholic. So I am wired to pay attention to other people's needs, right? Because as a child, that's how I stayed safe, you know? Is he good today or is he not good today? So I'm wired different. So that's the second reason I use the word servant. And the third and most important reason I take on servant, and the hardest one to embrace and keep in the fore, is that I'm supposed to be God's servant. And to be God's servant, I have to say no to all those other folk. No, I'm not your slave, you know? I am not, right? No, I really, even though I'm aware of how you're feeling, your feelings are not going to control me because God has a mission for me. So the question then becomes, with all the noise in our lives, all the, hey, you got to do this, watch this TV program, watch this new video, hey, you don't have time to rest, you need to do that. How do you discern the still small voice, which might come not in the rubric or the paradigm of production, but in the paradigm of peace, right?
Yeah.
You know, because you could be at peace while you're working, or you could be at peace while you're sitting still. But the object has to be, how do I walk in peace through this time? You know, whether I'm doing something or doing nothing. Hey, take it away, Shonda.
And that's so hard to find right now, right? I mean, that piece is, man, I have been recommending, and it's a book that BK and I use in the class on self-care for the movement, a book called Trauma Stewardship. I have been recommending that book to at least 3 people a day for the past 3 months, because so many of us are called to this work of caretaking. Yes, that's the book. And this book talks about how in the midst of showing up for people in trauma, we take on secondary trauma. And the reality is, for those of us who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, we're already living with primary trauma. And then these moments, the COVID moment, the moment that's been brought up by George Floyd's murder and so many others, those bring out the primary trauma while we're showing up for folks, and also internalizing their trauma. I gotta say, y'all, we're not always being our best selves right now. I was just at an Oakland Peace Center board meeting, and you will not meet more beautiful people, Black and Latinx and Asian, all working together, showing up for the city all the time, trying to create peace, trying to end violence in the streets, trying to end state-sanctioned violence. And we tore each other to shreds a week ago in our last board meeting. It wasn't even supposed to be a big meeting. We were just passing a budget we all already agreed on. We are not being our best selves. And I spent the last week checking in one-to-one with all my board members, and we're all like, don't know what just happened there, because we love each other and we love the work and we love the mission. And we are carrying so much right now. And I find myself having conversations with folks who are saturated with guilt that they're not in the streets, or defensiveness about the fact that they're not in the streets. I wish we had the capacity to slow down for a minute and just be witness to each other's grief. Because this has been 400 or 600 years in the making. And we got a lot of work ahead of us. And I love that you chose Jeremiah, because that is the prophet in the Bible who breaks my heart open the most. Because he was not signed on for a short-term thing. He had to do that work on behalf of God and suffer for it for years in order to accomplish what God wanted him to accomplish. And so I'm excited about the fact that people are pushing things forward, and I am thrilled that there are people energized for this moment in the movement. And for those of us who don't have that energy, if we could just be witness to the grief that is driving this, to be witness to that, to be Jeremiah's, to name it, and to name it for the people who can't see it, who are so caught up in vandalism, looting, violence, whatever, the fireworks, whatever it is, that they can't see the devastating grief that is driving all of the movement right now.
Yeah. I echo with you around your, what I will call, we are all in many ways on edge. I have even found myself just more so than usual. No need to say anything in the comments, but easily irritated by all things.
Yeah.
So I went to the dentist earlier. My appointment's at 2:20. Another lady's appointment is at 2:30. What do I have to do with appointments? Nothing. I don't schedule it. I just show up at the time that they tell me to show up. And so I show up, check in. She comes in after me. The lady takes her. She says, my appointment's at 2:30. They check her right at the back. Okay, so in my chair, I'm having to talk myself down, right? Because surely this is an act of racism. And so I think sometimes we miss the impact that this moment is really having on all of us. And there is this feeling that I have to fight it all, that I got to deal with the gender bias when I'm on the Zoom call. And if I'm the only woman, I'm instantly the secretary, not just you servant, but even sometimes when you walk in as the woman, you are automatically relegated to that position. Then you also, have to manage, should I be managing the protest moment? But I'm conflicted because I can't in clear conscience tell you to go outside in a protest when I also have a full testing site on you, right? And so it's all of these divisions and conflicts, and yet we are called to fight the good fight of faith. Meanwhile, Jeremiah is saying, my family is turned against me. I got own issues in my own household. I'm locked in the house with a spouse that I never spent this much time with. I did not realize my children were crazy, like the teacher said, until I had to homeschool, right? So it's all of these things.
Yes.
And I can't go to choir rehearsal, which is the place where I come to connect with other believers and release it. I can't come to the building and do my service and escape my thing.
Yeah.
And so then that begins to show up in other ways that we won't even get into. But you mentioned the book, Trauma Care. Is that what it was called? Wait a minute. I wrote it down. Trauma Stewardship.
Yeah.
Why did you pick that? In either of you. Mm-hmm.
Good.
All right. I think it was because many of us in the church are called to be caretakers. And some of that's where the tension of this moment's showing up is, I didn't come into this work to be a prophet. I came in to be a caretaker. And the book Trauma Stewardship reminds us of the burden that places on our own souls. So if we are showing up and trying to be apolitical, and we're just trying to love on folks, we're still taking on the burdens that they are carrying. And how do we take care of ourselves in that moment? It's kind of that put on your own oxygen mask first thing from back when we still used to fly.
Yeah.
And I feel like BK has modeled how we all struggle with that, taking care of ourselves so we can take care of our community stuff really well.
Yeah,
I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Yeah, I don't know how I model it because I always, I'm struggling because I think I always fail at balance. And mishpat, tzedakah, the Hebrew words that we translate justice, I think are better translated balance. And the question you were just so adroitly talking about managing trauma and the stress. The picture or the question came up for me. How do we, like Jesus, go to sleep in the back of the boat while the storm is raging all around us? You know what I mean? But wait a minute. You know,
Yes,
I could,
yes, yes.
if I was a good preacher, I could run with that metaphor and just work it. But I know Pastor Jackie
Feel
can do
free, feel free. You can work it for a minute. We got a whole hour. I need you to work that for a minute.
But what pauses me in that kind of celebratory kind of, sleep in the back of the boat while the storm is raging around us is if you look at what comes before that text, they kind of wore Jesus out. Okay. He was so worn out. He's like, I'm going to sleep. And then got up. I don't want to get in trouble with Allen Temple. I'm going to just say this because it's Theological Thursday, and you might have to deconstruct it later. Jesus was so tired, he got up and cussed out the storm, They just wrote, be still, peace, be still. But I think Jesus did a little fisherman. What the? I'm trying to, okay. So how Shonda wrote several books. One of her best one I'm in. Nah, just kidding. But in that book, we were talking about, or she asked me questions, which I tried to suggest. We have 400 years of pain we carry, and for me, it is a deliberate and daily struggle not to let the rage leak, not to let the rage come out while I try to hold on to a humanity that has not been affirmed, right? Contextually, we who have not yet been fully endowed by our culture as being fully human, that's why they shoot us in the back. That's why they lean on us, because they don't recognize that we're human. We're not like them, right? And that energy and that rage has to be mitigated so that we could live and have joy. But just to be disjunctive, let me also say, before you two make sense of this. I don't think the world's going to go back to what it was. It never will.
Never.
It won't. Mm-hmm. It's gone. The world we imagined is gone, right? Mm-hmm. And the world that was is gone. And the question is, what world will be? Yeah. And COVID, I wish I was at that conversation you had, is COVID the judgment of God? But what COVID suggests, the divine whisper in the COVID reality is calling us to what we truly love, to those we love so much that we are willing to lay down our lives to love them, right? It's calling us to some, not only solidarity in the love, but to some quietness.
Yeah.
It's calling us to quietness. And we fight the quietness. We fight, not turning on the TV and not trying to be, buzzing around like a little gnat, and it's time to soar like an eagle. It's time to ride the wind up high and stop and start thinking about the real significant things like who are we, who have we been, and who do we want to become, right? And the priesthood of all believers, when I do communion now, y'all all have to be priests. Y'all all have to be ordained. Y'all all have to get your little cup and wave and pray over it and believe it's holy, right?
Right.
So, we have an invitation to live another way. Mm-hmm. But, Arundhati Roy said, this is a portal. COVID is a portal, to a new world. Mm-hmm. And she said we can try and drag all our prejudice, all our excesses, all our extractive technologies through that portal if we want. Or we can let all that stuff go and come and imagine a new world.
And it's interesting you lift that up in that way, because that is in many ways, for many people, another layer of grief and trauma, because you are mourning the loss of what you know to be familiar and what you grew comfortable with, right? And so there are people, they like coming in the sanctuary. They like the table. They like the gloves. And so even having conversations with members and leaders around coming back and returning, it is difficult. I find myself challenged in saying, honey, let that go. You know, I've been saying 2021 since March, and a friend of mine said, stop saying that. You can't say that. You know, you have to be mindful that some of us are not ready to hear that. And I'm like, honey, the voice of a prophet can't wait till the people are ready to hear it. Because where is the preparation in that? Right. Part of the reason Jeremiah has to continue sounding the alarm, of course, you know, through the tenures of 5 kings, is so that when Babylon finally showed up, you couldn't say, Lord, why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me? And so to think that, yes, you can go back, but you can't sing. You can't touch a physical Bible. You can't sit next to anybody. You can't pass the peace. You can't have children's church. You can't. And so people are saying, wait a minute, wait. And so when you add even that, the layer of grief that comes from losing the thing that brought you comfort while you grieve the racism and the sexism, the systemic injustice, and all of this other stuff that we're dealing with, this is the thing that brought me comfort. And now you snatching that too. So then it does force us to engage in ways. And in many ways, it can be a good thing, because we can't spoon feed no more. You have to have your own devotional life and read your own text and buy your own crackers and, you know, decide wine or grape juice, whatever you're doing, just do it in remembrance of Jesus. So much to contend with.
So let me throw in 2 words. So COVID, if I was going to be theological, I would name COVID sit still. Y'all don't remember when grandma say sit still? Remember we hear, if you've never heard this, you've heard about it, that when the thunder and the lightning came, that grandma would say, sit down, because the Lord's talking.
Yes.
Put a blanket over the mirror and things like that.
Cover the mirrors and be quiet.
Right, be quiet.
Yeah.
And I think that some of our religion, maybe most of it, was idolatrous. And we got comfortable with the things that made us feel good, and we left off the most important part, and that is the communal connection with a God that's more than us and that is among us. And so perhaps this sit still time is time to find out, because this world is not made up of flesh and bone and stone, and that God is real, and that there are connections, spiritual, you could say metaphysical if you want. There's a realm of spirituality that is now open for us to investigate, that we either took for granted or didn't realize. My ancestors, they knew how to communicate without using their voice or revealing themselves. Amen. And Dr. Cummings talks about, he asked me one day, did I believe that the slaves could fly back home to Africa, at the night? And I told him yes. There are let me just say, because that sounds like a crazy word. Let me use a Christian word. There are spiritual connections that we must engage and learn and discern the difference between good and evil, because there's evil spirits too, right? But we got to sanctify our imagination and reach across and through. This is a spiritual thing we're doing right here, right? Yeah. If somebody came from the 1900s or the hundreds and saw us doing this, they go crazy. You know what I mean? And we take it for granted. So I think we are in this sit still time. We're called to go deeper inside, to go into those shadows and find out what the shadow has to teach you, you know, about how we move, how we come out in 2021. Because if we come out in 2021 the same way we went in 2020.
Yeah. And I've been saying that to Alan Temple, you know, because I'm a firm believer. We would hear it growing up. This too shall pass. That is a true statement. But the question is not, will it pass? The question is, how will you be once it passes?
Yeah.
And that is the work and the challenge, I think, that is happening in this hour. But you spoke to something and talked about wickedness, and that's the word that's used in that Jeremiah text. And so, Reverend Ja, I know you were on the forefront of working in some environments. And here's the thing. Can I just say this to y'all? And she hears this all the time and knows this. But part of what makes her lethal is when she walks in the room, don't nobody know what she is. And so because she presents a particular way and people think they know, they just assume, oh, okay, you know, we going to put her in this box. She's on this side of the line. We good. And then she start talking and they be like, hold on, wait, why she got a sorry on? What is this? She's anti what? Wait a minute. So and you know it's true. You are on the forefront doing some incredible work around anti-racism, anti-oppression training. And we recognize that work is not just flesh and blood work. So can you help just speak to us about what you encounter, what that good fight of faith is like, and how can, for those who are engaged in their own little, you know, because there's Deborah that goes out and, you know, rides out with Barack in the war, but then there's Yael who's managing the demon that showed right up in her house, the wickedness that was right in her house. But the beauty of it is both women were equipped for the fight.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. With different tools. Yeah, and it's actually all kind of connected to what y'all have been talking about already, which is so much of our spiritual work in a lot of our faith communities has been helping us to survive trauma, to survive the horrors of our day-to-day life. And we also know that the tools that help us survive are never adequate to allow us to thrive. And so, BK, as you're talking about this as a portal, like that we could imagine a different way of being, there's so much we're grieving, there's so much we're losing of what was life-giving, in what took care of us so we could survive in church. And in the midst of grieving that, if we're honest about it, if we're honest that we have lost it, if we're honest that it's not coming back the way it used to be, that might actually open up the doors for something more powerful, more transformative, more life-giving. And it's only in fully grieving it, rather than trying to hold on to it like we should cling to the dead instead of move towards resurrection, that we won't get there. But if we grieve, if we mourn, that's how we make space for the resurrection work that's ahead of us. Now, the reality is, those evil spirits, I mean, the fact of the matter is this country was founded 600 years ago, if you include the Spanish attempts to enslave indigenous people and those hundreds of years of attempted genocide, and 400 years ago when the enslavement of Black folks was introduced into this country. Stolen labor on stolen land is baked into every part of this country. And the funny thing about being in Oakland is that even when almost all of our leadership are people of color, white supremacy is so powerful, we've all internalized it, so that at the moment we had opportunities to resist gentrification, our council, including people whose spiritual commitments I do not question, were terrified of losing the white man's money, and chose a path of gentrification that has pushed out so much of our community. And that in this moment, of moral imagination when we are saying, what would it look like if we created opportunities for women who are suffering from domestic violence, for children who are being pushed from schools into prisons, for all of the folks who are living in the streets to actually get housing services, if we chose to reprioritize our funding structures in the city of Oakland and invest in those things so we didn't need as much policing. In this moment, our council has chosen to double down on a fear structure instead of a liberation and compassion structure. White supremacy shows up over and over. That evil power keeps showing up. I keep joking with my friends who are across the country who say, it must be so easy for you in Oakland. And I can say, the thing about white supremacy is it is not a partisan issue. And so we have so much work ahead of us. There's one thing I want to share, which I think is really important for us to remember. My mentor, and maybe a little bit yours, BK, is the Reverend Phil Lawson. He was James Lawson's baby brother and has mentored a lot of us in this new phase of the civil rights movement. And he consistently says, whenever we win something in city council, a tiny little victory that we're all excited about, he'll say, that's great, but the fight was never to pass this piece of legislation. The fight wasn't even for housing justice. The fight was for building God's beloved community here on earth. And when we lose something, he says the exact same thing. It is sad we lost. We put a lot of work into that, but the battle was never over that piece of legislation. It wasn't even over this justice issue. It's about building the beloved community here on earth. And that's the thing I think we sometimes forget as people of faith is we have this thing that the activists on the front lines desperately need. We have hope, we have imagination, we have a vision of what the world can look like. That every single Sunday we pray into being whenever we pray the Lord's Prayer. The community needs what we have to offer. We just need to show up with it. So I have more to say on that, but I'm going to pause because y'all actually have more wisdom on this than I do.
Not even. But interestingly, I think the difficult thing for Black folk, people of color, to admit to themselves, admit to ourselves, is that there are those of us whose comfort, whose position, whose power, if you will, however you define power, is rooted in this present system staying the same.
Wow.
Right? Wow. So that's hard. Even as Christian people, as believers, many of whom have the right perspective, have the right theology, are doing the right work, and yet find it difficult because we benefit. And that's kind of the truth that we won't tell ourselves, right? Back in that Jeremiah text, God said, he said to him, look here, we had a covenant coming out of Egypt. We had an understanding that if you did this, I would do that. I've been doing this, and you all been doing whatever it is that you want to do. Inside the temple worshiping, but you worshiping idols and killing your kids outside of the temple. So you're in here trying to have a conversation with me and ignoring everything else that is going on around. And so when you talked about, you said something about tools for thriving. Can both of you speak to that? What are some of the tools for thriving? Because the biggest tool that for many believers has been snatched away from them. They feel because doors aren't open, like let's stop. We had a whole big thing right here in Oakland amongst Oakland clergy because we wanted the governor to declare us essential, as if we needed the governor to declare us essential. If you were doing the work of Jesus, you didn't need anybody to tell you you were essential, right? We had a whole big thing here amongst clergy because of our attachment to our facilities, right? And so what are some of those tools for thriving that people who are looking, who are listening, who are searching can take away, because survival, I was born into survival mode, live into survival mode. Many of us are ministering these days in survival mode, worried about, and I recognize my own privilege. I stand on the shoulders of those who built what I inherited. But there are others for whom this is life and death for their families, life and death for their ministries. 3 months we could budget and do for, but month 4 through 6, they're having different conversations.
Right. So let me just throw out 3 independent things. Quickly, money is a trick. Money itself is a trick. If you study where money came from, who started coining money, it's a trick the rich use to extract labor from the poor. The second thing I want to say is that Jeremiah contextually is we might say global, but it was certainly a regional conversation, right? That Jeremiah was talking not about individual freedoms and individuals, autonomy or expression. He was saying that, we were happy when Josiah was doing all that stuff, but Josiah was only doing that stuff because Assyrian was getting their butt kicked in a minute. There was Israel is stuck, was never a world power. And the world powers, when there was a vacuum where between Assyria and Babylon, then Israel thought they were something. And as Babylon was gaining ascendancy, Jeremiah was saying, yo, stop. It's a new day. It's a new day. We got to let Egypt go for a second. This is a new day. It actually is a new day. And if you look at the global situation, Erdogan and Modi and Bolsonaro and Trump. Trump is not just, Trump evolved, and the Republican Party and the do-nothing Democrats and neoliberalism created Trump. Mm-hmm. And they celebrate him. Rich people are not mad at Trump. They ain't mad at him at all, right?
Exactly.
So we have to look at what is God doing globally? And right now, and let me get to your question. Right now, we as a globe are going to have to decide how we govern ourselves. And it may just be that democracy, small d democracy, is no longer the paradigm that moves governments. That could happen in 5 years. It could be gone. Now, the third thing I want to say goes right to your question. What are the tools that we need to navigate this time? And I'll just suggest one, and I'm sure others will come up. One is to embrace, and we see this in all religions, and we miss it in Christianity so often, to embrace the sacredness of the present and the God in the present. And we often abandon the peace we have in the present for anxieties over past imaginations or future fantasies. And one of my disciplines reminds me that worry is nothing more than my imagination set on self-destruct. Worry is a negative fantasy. And just as I can imagine, and Shonda taught me, trust is my relationship with the unknown. So I can, if I'm going to think about the present, I can choose to think about, if I'm going to think about the future or the past, I can choose to think about it in benevolent, loving, gentle ways. But because I am human, the strong part of my being is dominated by what would protect me. So I'm always looking out for danger, right? Precognitively, I am predisposed to look for danger because that's how I survive. But now that I am a sentient being, now that I have God, now that I can realize, I know that I'm not, I'm not in the jungle with saber-toothed tigers around. I can embrace the safety and the sacredness of the present. And often what we have to do when we find ourselves spiraling, right, is bring it back in to, are you okay? I'll tell you, and that's not, there are real theologians and folk who write great books about this, but I learned this in the pit of my own despair and despond. And I was so deeply, darkly depressed. I was underneath. I thought about taking my life every moment of every day. Right, that's where I was. And one such time, one day I was, just complaining to God, like, look at where I am, and I've been praying to you, and this is where you have me in this law of despond, like, right? I'm just so terrible. And God said to me, I don't say that God speaks to me often. I just think he does. I think God speaks to me more than God actually speaks. But this one I know. God said, well, Brian, how you doing right now? And I said, well, I'm okay right now. So, are you hungry right now? I said, no, I just ate some spaghetti right now. And God brought me right down to the moment, because I'm suicidal about my imaginations of the future.
Yeah.
And my despair over my past. And God brought me right down. How you doing right now? Okay. You crying and complaining about tomorrow. I got tomorrow.
Right.
You need to relax. How you doing right now? Right? Yeah, so that's my.
Actually, I think that's kind of how the divine shows up in some amazing ways. So I'm going to tell a testimony on BK that he didn't ask me to tell, which is following on the heels of that. There was a period where I was struggling to get out of bed, and BK was like, this ain't how you usually are. What's going on? And his first question was, do you feel like killing yourself? And I said, no. And he's like, well, I can work with that then. And every day for 3 weeks, while I was supposed to be working for him and getting work done for him, every day for 3 weeks, he called and he said, what's going to bring you some joy today? How are we going to make sure that happens? And there's this old joke, right? Y'all know it, about a guy falls down a hole. The doctor walks by. The guy shouts up, hey, buddy, I'm stuck in this hole. Can you help me? Doctor throws down a prescription, keeps walking. A minister walks by. The guy shouts up, hey, buddy, I'm stuck down in this hole. Can you help me out? And the minister writes out a prayer, throws it down in the hole, keeps walking. The guy's best friend walks by, and he says, Joe, can you hear me? I'm stuck down in this hole. And Joe jumps down in the hole with him. And he's like, Joe, that was stupid. Now you're down in this hole with me. And Joe's like, yeah, but I've been in this hole before. I know how to get us out.
Wow. Yes.
He was that in that moment. And I also think Jesus is absolutely that for all of us. And we get to be Jesus for each other in this moment. One of the powerful tools of white supremacy is this myth of independence, this lie that gets told to us over and over, that we have to do it by ourselves, that we cannot rely on anybody else. And it is counter to all of our ancestral cultures. Yes. All of us come from ancestors where the community showed up for each other. The myth of independence was designed to divide us from each other and to shame those of us whose lives were made more difficult by white supremacy. I've got a friend who is convinced it is her fault that she is in debt due to those check cashing places. She believes that that is her fault because it was her job to get herself out of poverty. And so we keep getting told this lie over and over. And what's beautiful about this moment, and the one time in the whole history of white supremacy, we have the upper hand. We already know how to do mutual aid. We already know how to be community for each other. We've got centuries and millennia of practice with this, and we do it all the time. And if we've learned anything in this COVID moment, it's that isolation will kill us. We need each other. The Oakland Peace Center slogan is, "We need us." And the thing is, because we come out of a people of faith, and because we come out of ancestors who were not shaped by white supremacy, we've got the tools that everyone needs right now. So in the midst of us grieving all of these things that have been taken away from us, what a gift to pause and say, oh my gosh, the way we have been church, the way we take meals to our elders, the ways that we show up and pray over each other, the ways that we check in when we haven't heard from somebody in a while, that's the only way humanity survives this. How remarkable that after centuries of being told we are less than human, we are the future of humanity.
Yeah, that's right. Amen.
Indeed, in so many ways. In so many ways we are. So, you all were and are teachers of emerging leaders, teaching people how to use their faith as a tool to bring about change in the world. So if we are all viewing this, every person in the chat, everybody who will see this when it goes live, and those who will see it later, are desiring to be emerging leaders, I'm going to name an issue, and I need both of you to speak to us about what ought to be on our agenda after we recognize money is a trick, after we pause at our present in the moment, after we recognize the future is a fantasy, and yet we are shapers of it and called to it. So the most immediate thing, defund the police. Here is what I found. When you say defund the police, not even just in white environments, but when you say it in Christian environments amongst Black folks and people of color, they say, hold up, wait a minute. Because when they hear the word defund, they automatically picture, we are not going to have a police department. And if Pookie and them come break in my car, who am I going to call? Who's going to show up? Am I going to be safe? Unpack for those who are listening these terms. We've already been over the politics of faith, so we know that to be a Christian is to be political, period. That is not a debate in this field. When you say defund the police, what ought people understand?
Well, now that's a beautiful smile, and just patiently, passive aggressively throwing it to me. Okay, so I have a background in industrial design and marketing and psychology, and Shonda does too. So we have to. It's unfortunate that you're asking me to appropriate someone else's metaphor. I would say something like balance the police, right? Or let's return to what it was, stop police abuse. Because when you abuse police, they abuse us. So what Shonda and I teach is that you have to speak in metaphors, which Dr. Jackie, you do incredibly well, but not only do you speak in pictures, because people understand pictures, and defund the police is a picture that I don't think is appropriate, right? That's not what they're really talking about. They're really talking about balancing it. They're really talking about, let's not show up to a medical emergency with a gun. That's what they're talking about, right? Not just a gun, but a badge with somebody who's overworked, overstressed, don't know how to answer the problem, and the only tool he has is to lock you up or shoot you, right? We don't want you in that situation, right?
Right.
So we talk about speaking to the highest moral value and the greatest common denominator. So the metaphor we choose when we talk about balancing the police or where we send our city resources, we have to couch it in the highest moral value. What's our value? that we all want to be safe. Because they're saying defund the police because they're killing us.
Right.
But we all want to be safe, right? Even white-haired grandma, blue-eyed grandma wants to be safe, right? So we have to use that word and that metaphor, and then we build a bigger tent. Now, both prongs are necessary. I want to say before I stop talking, we need a very strong Black Lives Matter movement, a very strong, oh, the heck with all y'all police. We need that. And we need the other side too, right? We need a kind of like, okay, we can fix it. We can also fix it. So we need a Malcolm and a Martin, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that threw me off. I wasn't seeing Malcolm Martin. I was like, I'm not sure Martin's on the We Can Reform It side based on.
I'm speaking metaphorically. You know too much. You know too much. I know what you know, and I shouldn't use it, but go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I love the fact that you were talking about safety as the frame. We talk a lot about framing in our classes, thanks to BK, and thanks to George Lakoff, who's actually kind of a brilliant thinker on how we reframe our metaphors. Because Zach Norris from the Ella Baker Center has a book out, just came out recently, called We Keep Us Safe. And what I love about that book, because he's one of our own, right? What I love about that book is it is grounded in practical, tangible things. We keep acting like this notion of defund the police is a fantasy world, when in fact, people are actually already doing it. People are already building up community safety systems that are grounded in restorative justice, which is both an ancient indigenous practice, an ancient West African practice, and a contemporary Christian practice. This notion of second chances, this notion of holding people accountable for the harm they've done and putting them in conversation with the people they have harmed, so that the people who are harmed are the ones determining what happens, rather than some arbitrary state system where right now, if you cause a crime, your crime is actually against the state, not against the person you've harmed. There's no restoration of relationship. There's no actual justice happening. So I think when we talk about We Keep Us Safe, it gives us a chance to imagine what if Community Ready Corps, which is staffed by people who are trained in de-escalation practices, many of them formerly incarcerated people from our own community, whose first job is to help reduce the likelihood of violence and then to address the harm that's been done with force if needed, but only if needed. What if we could expand that beyond the neighborhood in near East Oakland where they primarily work? What if we could expand that across the city so that we could have a safety system that we didn't have to wrestle with whether to call, because we don't want someone to end up dead because they were having a mental health crisis. So the thing I love about Zach, again, one of our own, an Oakland person who's been watching the ways we're experimenting with these models, is the We Keep Us Safe framework reminds us that we have ownership of this. This is not just something we have to outsource. This is something we can co-create, and people are doing to great effect in ways that allow us to live out our spiritual values of redemption, of transformation, of a different kind of community than one where you get thrown away immediately, and where the person who's the victim never really gets the healing they deserve.
And so for people who are listening, when they hear the term, what they ought to hear is reallocation of funds and reimagination of safety. And I am so glad you all have said that, because there are many of us who have shied away from it, because when they hear that trigger word, defund means take away the money. And so they think when something happens to them that there's not going to be a response. But here is what we need to realize. Specifically, Allen Temple. When Reverend Daniel Buford was our prophetic justice minister, he was engaged and we were engaged in a battle to demilitarize the police. When they talk about reallocation of funds, here is what you may not know. There is a certain portion of that police department budget that goes to military type and military style weaponry.
Sure.
They would bring in, particularly with OPD, I believe it was IDF that came in and provided training to the Oakland Police Department. Well, who the heck for? Why do we need military style weapons and military style training? For what? Who are you at war with? So then what happens is that when you leave whether it's a social service issue, whether it is a mental health crisis issue, whether it is a skirmish of some kind, you end up inadvertently criminalizing every single behavior. And so when you have people who are trained to respond military style, then there's not enough, time for them to say, oh, is this a mental health crisis? And so the idea is if we can defund, reallocate those resources and put them back where they belong, mental health services, social services, counseling, after school programs to give young people things to do, summer job programs, then you may see a de-escalation and a reimagination of policing. So that's the background. Please know there's a lot that what we see on the news is not all there is to know.
Amen.
So we owe it to ourselves to be critical thinkers and to be lifelong learners and find out what's underneath an issue. So defund the police. Second, voting.
Yeah. If voting did not make a difference, and you've heard this before, then they wouldn't be trying so hard to take it away from us. Voting is the Achilles heel of the neoliberal agenda because they throw at us all these images all the time to tell us it's our fault we're poor, that there's nothing you can do together, that don't come together. And I have books right behind me where in the late the early 19th century and the 18th century, where it was illegal after the emancipation, it was illegal for African Americans to stand anywhere, to congregate anywhere. 5 people, 4 people, that's illegal. So they want to push us apart, like Sandhya was talking about, individualizing us, right? Yeah, voting is an opportunity for collective action. Right? And voting must not be an end in of itself, but it must be the means through which we imagine we change our world gently, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some candidates for city council that we ought to get behind and then require them to do our bidding. Mm-hmm. And let me just say this, quickly leave it to Shonda. Yeah, if voting didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to take it away so hard. I want to invite you, we do this in our class, I want to invite folks to look at the charter. Because the charter on the mayor's job doesn't say take care of the residents of Oakland. Mm. The charter doesn't say make sure everybody has something to eat. The charter doesn't say make sure everybody has a safe place to sleep and to live. And why doesn't it? We could change that. We could say in the city of Oakland, if you live in Oakland, you get to eat. If you live in Oakland, you get a safe place to sleep, because we, the people of Oakland, decide that's what we're going to vote and decide that's what we're going to do, right? So voting is essential.
All right, Reverend Ja, I'll give you another one, the census.
The census, wow. I'm a hardcore nerd. I actually worked in Congress for the chair of the census subcommittee. I can talk about the importance of the census for eons. But one of the things that I don't think we think about, well, obviously, one of the things that I suspect many folks already know is it is how the money gets divvied up. And there have been so many ways that messaging has gotten out there to discourage people from participating in it so that people of color get less money. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to think about. But the thing that my kind of anti-racist history-telling friends have pointed out to me recently is we can learn some of the hidden histories about our communities through census records. I'm not going to use the person's name because I haven't gotten her permission, but a really, really important leader in our community in the city of Oakland said the reason she can track her ancestry is because in the 1780 census, enslaved people were listed on it. And she can track her origin story all the way back to when her people were forced to come here. And beyond and before that, because of census records. I'm really active in the South Asian community, and there is some amazing work going on right now to uncover the story of a Muslim Indian pupusa seller in Oakland in the 1910s who had just gotten out of prison. Now that sounds like a very random story, but for us to be learning about the multicultural history of South Asians and to recognize that the model minority myth that we get sold is a lie, that South Asians in this community look a lot of ways, have a lot of life experiences, have known incarceration, have known poverty. That's an important story for us to tell so that we can do a better job of solidarity with other folks who are struggling with financial crisis. There's a million reasons the census is important, almost all of them having to do with people of color having more access. And that's why they don't want us participating in it. Oh, weird. That was kind of like what BK was saying.
All right, final thing, and then I don't know.
Get us to stop. Yeah.
All right, final thing, and I don't even know how long we've been talking. I haven't even looked at the time. I have no idea because, you know, I breathe this. We could do it all night. Final thing, and then I'm going to ask you all to leave the people with a word of hope. COVID-19. I am of the mindset, I've said it faithfully, that we would be on complete lockdown if we were not bombarded with news daily that says it's adversely impacting Black people and people of color. If this were not now being almost marketed as a people of color disease, people of color issue. And I want us to be real careful because pretty soon it's going to be linked to our own behavior, right? So we have to be mindful of the ways in which we are framed and how things are framed. We will be on complete lockdown if they were not saying every day, oh, okay, you know, it's killing them. So what is your message? I'm still telling people, listen, we are listening to the science. I don't care who holds a rally anywhere. You have to be mindful, wash your hands, follow the protocols. And I think it touches me so deeply is because I know so many people who have been personally impacted. It is not a hoax. And you cannot allow people to make your safety a battle of faith. Your faith wasn't designed to battle microbes. You're fighting an invisible battle. So it's not a matter of faith. So what do you say to people about COVID?
Okay, so you want me to go first? Okay. Couple things. One, I'm trying to turn it to hope because my Extinction Rebellion folks say you can't give them hope because you gotta live in despair for a minute. But let me just say, please understand, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Brandy Lee. She says on all her authority and 47 other psychiatrists who've looked at it. She said Donald Trump is at war with reality. And he is always going to do the wrong thing. He's always going to do the most dangerous thing. There's 120,000 Americans that have died already. There may be, if it just ran its course, 1 million Americans dead. There may be 2 million. With Donald Trump, there may be 3 million. So Hope. I'm going to get to hope. I got to get to hope. Understand asymptomatic transmission. That means you don't feel sick, you don't think you're sick, you don't look sick. Just like Dwight L. Hughley, right? Fell out. You know, he said, I was feeling fine till I fell out. So you don't know who has it or where it is or what it's, and that's why not testing is the Achilles heel, because if you don't test, you don't know where the disease is. So you don't know where to stay away from. So COVID is real. What is hope for? So I believe, so I've translated the Hebrew Bible when I was younger. I don't remember a lot of it, but this is what I do remember. The prophets, as the Bible and the Hebrew was recorded, the prophets' original prophecies were dark. They were just like, God's about to kick your butt. Sorry, bye. You know, they was like, God is sick of you. You know you're wrong. You've been wrong a long time.
Right.
Bye. And as they rewrote the story, and they were in the exile, they wrote in there, but a remnant, but God's not going to always be mad, so I want to invite, in January, I told my congregation when we were still worshiping, I said, listen, COVID is real, and some of us in here are going to get it. But what I want you to understand, and I want you to make up your mind right now, is that whether you get COVID or not, you're going to survive it. You're going to get through it. And we have to make up our mind, we're going through this.
Yes.
And here's my hope, and what I would like us to, in this quiet time, in this sit still time, that we reappropriate the history, our African history, our ancestral history, because like Shonda Jah said, all of us have ancestors that have made it through the time we're in. And we have to grasp a story that gets us through this portal and gets us and us ruling and creating and living in a world that has never been as good as it is. You know what I'm saying? So we have to hope our way through the darkness. This is our tomb moment. This is our tomb moment. But we are a resurrection people, And we have to embrace and we have to absorb the light of God until that light bursts out and we walk out the tomb, right? So we are resurrection people. We're not a run from the cross people. We're not a don't put me in that tomb people. We are resurrection people. And we are going to go through and we are going to shine. That's what that's my sense of hope.
Yes.
Reverend Jack. Yeah. And I feel guilty about saying this after that because that was such a word. It's also not just a live or die disease. And I think that that's important for us because we don't talk about that very much. But a friend of mine, a pastor friend of mine who got it, he was like, so it was rough and I made it through. And I'm going to spend the next 2 years worrying every day about if I'm going to get kidney failure or if my heart's going to explode. And he is a young man and a healthy man. And I think that that's one of the reasons we don't want to play around with this. Is it's not just a you make it or you don't. It's a lingering, ongoing, the rest of your life thing. So that's why we need to not play with it. My word of hope is a much less theological one. It's the story some of y'all have heard from the Baltimore nursing home, African-American run, African-American staff, African-American residents, nursing home that heard the resident-in-chief talking about our current White House resident, talking about in February how we're going to have like 15 cases and it'll be over with. And they were like, okay, if that's what he thinks, then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to shut it down. We're going to put all of these protocols in place. We are going to protect the heck out of our people. Because whatever he says, we're going to choose the opposite. And that's going to keep us going. They have had 0 cases because their whole way through, their strategy has been do the opposite of what that dude tells us to do, and we'll be okay. So to me, that's a word of hope, is paying attention to where the forces of evil are and figuring out what the opposite of them is, and that's going to keep us alive. The one other thing I want to share is I find some hope in the fact that we are not in this by ourselves, even in this community of Oakland, even in this country. I have a really inspiring colleague. Her name's Aang Humso, the first woman to head a theological institution in India. And she's from the Naga people. These are fierce, warrior, indigenous, Christian people who have been in a low-grade battle against the Indian government ever since partition, ever since independence in the 1940s. She was grieving the loss of one of their elders, a real warrior for Naga rights. And she said, because of the pandemic, I couldn't go to his funeral. And that was heartbreaking to me, because even in this small, very isolated place, they are not untouched by this pandemic. And Aang said, and so now that he has gone to a better place, we get to pick up his warrior tools and fight the battle of liberation on his behalf. And that's how he stays alive and the Naga people stay alive. And this notion that we're in the same battle here in Oakland, we're in the same battle here in the United States, and we've got Naga sisters and brothers, siblings who have been fighting for their dignity for centuries at this point as indigenous people. And they're our family because they're siblings in Christ. They're fighting the same battle. They're showing up with us in all the ways that we can. They're proclaiming Black Lives Matter because Naga lives matter, and they live in a country that doesn't believe that either is true. So there's something about this moment that allows us to show up for each other. And I think that that's where I'm finding some hope right now. And I hope others do as well.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I'm pretty sure we are over our time, but that is okay. That is what we do. But I certainly do not want to close this moment without asking, Servant, will you pray for us? Because the people need a wow before we end. Just bring us before the Lord in this moment, however you are led.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's look to the Lord. Lord, we just thank you for your grace. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for this fierce, gentle, loving, visionary pastor in the Reverend Dr. Jackie Thompson. Lord, let her lead, and more, let the people follow, Lord. Let the people follow until we see rivers, Lord, not just Allen Temple, but the city of Oakland moving from lethargy, moving from despair into the beloved community. Lord, for everyone who is home and wanting to be out, for everyone who is in fear and riddled with doubt, we ask you to infuse each of them and all of us with a sense of love, a sense of hope, and the courage that comes when love and hope infuse our imagination. Let us begin to hear the laughter and joy of our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and our great-great-great-grandchildren living in a world that we help to create, that they can laugh and sing and dance and wonder why the world was once so crazy. We thank you for the love that drives us. In Jesus' name. Wow.
Wow. Start wow in those comments. Thank you both so much for taking this time, and I appreciate you. I know that the people appreciate you. We thank you for the service that you render on so many fronts, the sacrifices that you are making at this time, and the blessing that you have been not only to Allen Temple, but to the world. And so just know we are partners in the struggle. And one day this will be over and we will look back and say, remember when? And but until then, until we are all able to meet again. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart. And we certainly lift up your families and your loved ones. And we speak blessings and strength and power and endurance and encouragement. And I always end up apologizing because I am one of the few people who is excited. I am excited by challenge. And it's only because my grandmother, who was apostolic, you talked about stories. My grandmother, who was apostolic, used to always remind me that some things are necessary, that you may not like them, you may not understand them, but they are necessary. And I just believe we are in a necessary moment. And so I am grateful that I've been able to share it with you. Alan Tipper, you know I love you. Those of you who are not a part of us, you know we appreciate you coming by and joining us too. Share, 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 share. And until we come back again, be blessed, wear your mask, wash your hands, join us for all the services, find a way to engage to make somebody's life better, and find a tool to thrive. Find your story. Somewhere in your family, in your life, there is a story of triumph that you can recall and lean on. Until we meet again, love you all. Bye-bye.